Welcome to Larry the Alchemist, and welcome to another edition of Sabbath Sunday. This is where Darren and I get together with you on Sundays to discuss all things Black Sabbath. Darren and I have a Black Sabbath podcast. We'll link it in the description down below for you to check out. And for today's episode, we are going to be ranking the songs on the first Black Sabbath album, the self-titled first Black Sabbath album. Released in 1970, we thought it would be fun to go through and rank the songs on this album. Now, a couple of notes before we start. The US version of this record lumps together a bunch of songs. It lumps together Wasp, Behind the Wall Asleep, basically NIB, and then it puts together as one track a bit of Finger, Sleeping Village, Warning. We're separating Behind the Wall Asleep and NIB. We're also not counting these songs Wasp, basically, and a bit of Finger. Those are all as Sabbath did on these earlier records. They would sort of put these little titles at the beginning or ends of songs. It was just a way for them to get more publishing credits or something like that. But they're really not songs, or they're just sort of the intros of these proper songs. So we have 8 songs altogether. We're also including Evil Woman, which was in place of Wicked World on the UK version of this particular album. So we are going to include Evil Woman into our ranking. We love this record. It's obviously a milestone, a classic moment, the birth of heavy metal. If you had to trace it back to something, this album would probably be it. So we love these albums, love this album. Even though a song may be our number 8, that doesn't mean that we hate it by any stretch. I know for me personally, this was difficult to do because I basically love every song on this album, but we wanted to put ourselves to the task. So here we are. We're going to start with our least favorite. We got 8 songs all together. Going to start with our least favorite and move our way up to our favorite. So Darren, what do you got at number 8?
Going to start with my least favorite, and that is, without a doubt, Evil Woman. And it's kind of strange because usually the UK versions will have like the better song selection, or there'll be some bonus track on a Euro or UK or Japanese version that makes you want to get it. And it's kind of strange that it's actually probably the weakest song on the album is only available in the UK version, which of course was the first version that came out. We were fortunate in the US to get wonderful Wicked World. But Evil Woman is part of the album, even if it's not on the US version or hasn't been for a long period of time. Now the Rhino has put out the reissues in the US and has all the track listing of Wicked World and Evil Woman. But as far as Evil Woman goes, I thought it was pretty cool when I first heard it. And of course, my first exposure, my first experience with the self-titled album was the US track listing. So Wicked World was it for me. And then when I got the UK version and I heard Evil Woman, it was kind of a novelty. I thought it was kind of cool, but as time went on, I realized that it really is just an ill fit for the record. There's such a good flow from start to finish on the US version, including Wicked World. When Wicked World is taken out of the context, it just sounds conspicuously missing, but it also sounds a little disjointed. Nothing wrong with the song. It's okay. It's kind of a pop song. It was originally done by the band Crow. And it's not, in Black Sabbath's version, is not that much different, although it does not have the horns that were in the original version as done by Crow. And I think there's
an alternate version of it.
The alternate
showed
version
up on the deluxe first album that's got a version with horns in it.
Yeah, and that probably wasn't such a great idea. But anyway, number 8 for me is Evil Woman, dead last.
Yeah, same for me, Evil Woman. It's hard to imagine not having Wicked World on the record and having this in there, because to me this would be a total mood killer. It's not that it's terrible. It's okay as like an early single something that was on a single before they became
Sure.
who they are. It's okay as a little relic curio piece. But to put it on the album to me is no, it wouldn't work at all. It sort of reminds me of, I just did a video today on Uriah Heep and their first album, self-titled, same, it had a similar situation. In the US, it had a track and there was a different track in, it replaced a track that was on the UK version. And the UK version, the song, it just,
Lucy Blues.
Lucy Blues. I wouldn't say it ruins the record, but it's just by far my
Man,
least favorite song.
that
Bird of
record
Prey
without Bird of Prey.
is
Oh
so
man.
much better. It's so much better. And this is the case here. It's like, oh my goodness, Wicked World is just so much better than Evil Woman. And I never even realized, I can't remember how I heard, I had heard Evil Woman way before these deluxe editions. I think maybe somebody just burnt it onto a disc for me. It was on a bootleg or something. And it wasn't until really much later that I learned that it was on the UK version of the first record. In fact, I learned about it when somebody was talking about We Sold Our Soul for Rock and Roll, that, oh yeah, that was, the only value it really had was to people in the UK. It was the first time they got to hear Wicked World. And I was like, what? That Wicked World wasn't on the first album. So the only thing going for it is that it has evil in the title. I mean, there's nothing dark or anything about it. I guess they tried, I guess, to sort of make it fit the mood of Black Sabbath, but it just doesn't work as a standalone artifact, rarity. It's interesting and fun to listen to, but to put it in the album just does not fit at all. Sonically, mood-wise, just nothing about it for me fits with this record. And I don't want to say it would ruin the record, but I'm just very glad that I grew up with the US version. So
Yeah.
there you go. Okay, we're on number 7.
Okay, well, I just want to say one last thing about Evil Woman. I got the UK version, I think, sometime in the early 90s. It took me that long. And it was before the internet, before I had the internet anyway. And I found a copy in Goldmine magazine or newspaper. Do you remember Goldmine? In the back, it was all about record collecting, music collecting. But there was a seller that had, and I was specifically looking for the UK or Euro version of the self-titled album. I was really back into collecting records again, and I really wanted to expand my Black Sabbath collection and start buying these Vertigo versions. So I started with the self-titled, and I actually couldn't find a UK, so I got the first version was a Euro, was a German version, which sounds great, by the way. Arguably, maybe even better than the UK version, certainly better than the US version. But I was surprised that Evil Woman was on it, because I was just seeking it out because I had heard that there was a difference in fidelity. And also I wanted the gatefold. There were so many references in articles and interviews of Black Sabbath up to that time where they were talking about the inverted cross that was in the album. Of course, I got my US version. I'm like, what are you talking about? There's no inverted cross in here. So it made me aware that there was another version with a gatefold. So I was mostly interested in just having it for the sake of, a collector's item, memorabilia sort of a thing, or just to be a completist. And I was surprised, and I looked at the track order, and there it was, Evil Woman. I'm like, wow, that's pretty cool. And it was for a little while, but then I miss Wicked World. And
is it slotted in the same spot that Wicked World is on the record?
Yeah, it's the first song on side 2. And I have this is the UK version I have right here behind me, with the gatefold, and I have my German versions over there. Yeah, it's actually first song on side 2, Evil Woman, Don't Play Your Games With Me is the full title. First song on side 2. So it takes the place of Wicked World on the US version. First song on side 2.
Interesting.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, but anyway.
All right, so what do you got at 7?
7? Okay, well, this is now where it gets difficult, because Evil Woman it sticks out like a sore thumb. Here we have an album that has such a tremendous flow. It just one song flows into another. It sounds like it's a live set, and from what I've read, I mean, this is kind of the way it was recorded. I mean, the whole thing was done in like 12 hours. I mean, they went in and busted it out, and then they did some overdubs, and not very many, but yeah, I mean, it has a flow. Probably the way that they were playing these songs when they played live. They played live a lot. They're sometimes doing 2 or 3 sets a day. So the album has a real uh, great sequence. This is where it gets kind of hard to separate the songs and take them out of the context, but I did. And number 7 is Sleeping Village slash Bit of Finger. I love it. I love the song. But when I'm ranking, I'm doing this ranking, I'm finding that, there's other ones that I would have to say, and I'm trying to be objective about it. It's not necessarily what I would consider my favorite songs. I'm thinking what songs are presented or are what I would consider to be legitimately more well structured, have some elements to them that make them a little bit maybe more cohesive, and kind of put them ahead of some other songs. And as we go along the list, I mean, you'll see what I'm talking about. But for this song, Sleeping Village is kind of jammy. It easily sounds like something that was part of their live set, and I'm sure it was. So it's a little less cohesive in the song and traditional song structure. I like the vibe. I like everything about it, but when I'm going to rank the album, it's going to come in at number 7 for me.
Yeah. My number 7 is the same, Sleeping Village. And like you said, it gets hard at this point. And Sleeping Village lands here because there just really isn't much to it. It's, what is it, a minute long, a little over a minute or something. It's like 1 or 2 verses, and then it's kind of out. I get the impression that somebody was messing around with the mouth harp thing, and they just...
It was Roger Bain.
And they just did it, they just did it in the studio. It was something that just sort of happened. I like it on the record. It adds an atmosphere. I think that that's a good melody that Ozzy sings and everything, but it's hard to rank it any higher just because it's just so short, and it's basically just a little transitional thing on the record. But, again, Sabbath was kind of known to do this through these Ozzy era albums, to have these short little experimental things on the records, instrumentals and things like that. So, for that sake, it's still cool, and it still fits a purpose on the record. But here, when I got to rank them, I can't really justify putting it any higher than number 7.
I'm including actually the Bit of Finger part, which is about half of, see, on the US version, we've got a Bit of Finger, Sleeping Village, and Warning. And Warning is at around 9 minutes or so, I believe. If you're going by the UK track listing, it's really confusing, unnecessarily confusing. But yeah, so Sleeping Village is actually about I'll tell you exactly how long it is because I've got the record. And I'm not sure if the top times are on here, but it's about the total length of time, which occupies Warning. No, the times aren't on here. So it has that jam, which I guess
that thing at the beginning. Yeah, in my mind, I always just thought of it as the black sun rising in this, that part.
Yeah.
And I always thought of the dan 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 dan, that being part of Warning, which I guess it isn't, because
I can see that. I can see that. For me, Warning is when it starts boom, 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 boom.
Either way, it would still land at number 7 for me for the reasons that you said. Even if I included that sort of jammy, riffy thing at the beginning, it's not really much of a song. It's just more of a jam thing, and it's cool and everything, but it's not really much of a song. So it would still land at number 7 for me. But I see your point, and that does make sense that it would be laid out like that.
Yeah.
All right. So what do you got at 6?
6, I have Behind the Wall of Sleep. I like it just a little bit better than Sleeping Village, but again, it ranks a little bit lower than some of the other songs that are going to come before it. Mostly because it has those same qualities. It's kind of loose. It's kind of like, um, now they did do it in Reunion. Wasn't it on the Reunion album? Didn't they play that
Yeah.
live? So it
Yeah,
does have a little bit more of a cohesive aspect to it. So it works better than the Sleeping Village Bit of Finger as a standalone song. But in my ranking, it's it's below some of the other ones. But nonetheless, it's a great song.
yeah,
Working our way up now.
yeah. All right, number 6 for me is Warning, and I like it. It's a cover song. Ainsley Dunbar Experience.
Retaliation.
Right. Okay. Uh, I mean, it's cool. It's a blues. It's kind of dark. I like the lyrics. I like the bass line to it. It's pretty heavy, but it's a cover, and it's kind of just a straight ahead blues form, so to speak. Iommi stretches out in it, which is cool, but it comes in at number 6 for me just because it's a cover, and good cover to pick, much better than Evil Woman, but it's still a cover. One other thought, just to go back for a second. On the record, it lists A Bit of Finger, Sleeping Village. They should have flipped that around, because Sleeping Village is obviously, the title goes with the whole Black Sunrise, the lyrics that he's singing.
Yeah, he
there.
says Sleeping Village.
Yeah,
What are the lyrics?
exactly. And so they should have flipped it and said Sleeping Village, A Bit of Finger, and then it would have made a bit more sense to have A Bit of Finger being that instrumental thing. But I digress. Number 6 for me is Warning. All right, so that puts us at number 5.
Number 5. Okay. Number 5 for me is Wicked World. This probably should have ranked a little bit higher, but I think one of the reasons it doesn't overall is because it is probably a little bit longer than it needs to be. Not to say that I don't like all the expressions that are going on in the song, but there is some like superfluous guitar. It has less of an immediate or more cohesive song structure, so it kind of falls a little bit lower in the rank for me. It's a great song, totally like fits the mood of the album, fits the vibe of the album. Where it's located in sequence is perfect, but as a standalone song, it just has a little bit too much superfluous guitar soloing, and which builds into the atmosphere. I'm not saying it's a bad song. I'm just saying that compared to some of the other ones that are left now, it's got maybe just a little bit too much fat involved with it.
Yeah,
If that makes any sense.
sure. All right, number 5 for me. I really feel bad putting this one kind of down lower on the list, but it's just sort of a testament to the strength of the songs that will follow. But number 5 for me is The Wizard. I mean, I love the song. I don't know. I can't really say anything else besides just that I kind of like the songs that I ranked higher just a little bit better. But I mean, gosh, The Wizard is a classic. It is a classic sort of Sabbath thing that Bill Ward's all over it. I love the lyrics to it and everything, but it just lands at number 5 for me because I just like some of these other songs just a little bit more.
Yeah, I get it. Well, number 4 for me is The Wizard. I like it just a little bit more than Wicked World. I don't, it's hard to say I like one more than the other. I'm ranking it, and I'm trying, like I said, I'm trying to be objective about it. I'm trying to rank these songs in order of what are the takeaway songs. I think that my ranking at least goes more with the standalone songs, and as it goes further down the list, then they get the songs that are dependent on one another, the songs that are like coupled with other titles and things like that, the songs that start to create somewhat of a gray area within the album, or are like segues from one standalone song to the next. So we got those out of the way, and so now The Wizard is song number 2 on both the Euro, the UK, and the US version. First time I heard it, I thought it was really cool. I love The Wizard. That was the one that I would listen to probably the most when I got the album. I love the harmonica. I just thought that was so cool. Having a harmonica in a song and then having the heavy guitar, it's such like this dynamic that I thought was really interesting. Of course, I hadn't heard Jethro Tull yet. And of course, the first Jethro Tull album has harmonica and some pretty bluesy guitar, but this is heavier than Jethro Tull. So it was kind of daring to put the harmonica in there, but they did, and they did it really well. I love the lyrics. You know, it really creates a visual, and you know, in a lot of ways, when I was listening to this album as a kid, I'd sit there and I'd hold the album cover, and the album cover imagery, the photograph, the woman, it seemed to like really correspond with the lyrics for me anyway, in my mind, with the song of the Wizard, Misty Morning, Twinkling
Yeah,
Bell, you know, Clouds in the Sky.
yeah,
I love the imagery, I love the lyrics, and in the music, it's kind of funky. And of course, Bill Ward's center stage on this one. I love his playing. I love that he's really, you can tell he's really into it. He's really feeling it. He's going that extra mile to just get that
yeah,
bouncy vibe across that the riff has, and he's really, you know, he's really making it. He's obviously making it his song as well. You got Iommi, you know, Ozzy singing, Geezer's doing his, you know, magical bass work, but Geezer's right in there too, giving it his all. So, or Bill Ward is in there giving it his all too. So I really appreciate that. So number 4 for me is a Wizard.
yeah. You know, I think the Wizard ranked a little low for me because, like you, I used to like sort of gravitate towards that song when I was younger and first getting into this album, and I think it was because of the funky rhythm and the busy drums and everything. But I think I'm a little burnt out on it, and to me, it's sort of a jammy type of song. You know, there isn't a whole lot to the song, so that's why some of these other songs ranked a little higher for me, because I think that they're just from compositionally have a little bit more meat on their bones, to have a little bit more to them. So that leads to my number 4, which is NIB. And this is kind of a good example of what I'm talking about here. There's kind of a lot going on, especially if you factor in the, you know, if you sort of consider the little bass solo at the beginning, even if you don't want to consider the bass solo at the beginning, when Geezer starts with the distorted bass, super cool. The way the song builds, you know, towards the end of the song when Bill's doing those, you know, those snare hits and the guitars playing its lines. I think it's one of Iommi's. I think we did a top favorite Iommi guitar solos. I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
this was on my list because it's so kind of structured and well thought out. You know, when the end of this song comes up and he's doing that, you know, part is just great.
yeah, it's got a great energy.
You know, it's almost like a sing along type of solo, the way he starts that, much like maybe like War Pigs. So the song is very kind of, has these different sections to it. I think that they just flow really, really well together. I love the lyrics, you know, the storytelling. The devil falls in love with a girl. That line, you know, my name's Lucifer, please take my hand, is iconic. As a young kid, that just seems so like, you know, when that line came up, it's just so well placed in the song, the way the song, it's just fantastic lyrics, and just the vibe of the whole song and the groove to the whole song. And that main riff is just absolutely killer. And it's got the Ozzy, oh yeah, which is almost like you know, a signature thing of Ozzy at this point.
Hmm.
So number 4 for me, NIB.
Yeah, that is a great song. For 3, I'm going with Warning. Warning ranks pretty high up with me. And if you'd have asked me 10, 20 years ago, it might have been a little lower on the list, but, and it is a cover, as you pointed out, and Ainsley Dunbar's Retaliation originally did it. But Black Sabbath, this is more suitable to the other songs, the original compositions on the album. I think this blends well. And when I first found out that it was a cover, I was kind of surprised.
Yeah.
Looking back a little bit, because it sounds so very much akin to the rest of the material on the album. But they definitely make it their own. It's dark. I really like that. It is heavy, but it's more of a brooding kind of heavy.
Yeah.
And I think this album, along with the title track, pretty much are the 2 takeaways for this album for me, as far as what I think of when I think of this first album. When I think of the self-titled Black Sabbath album, I think of a very dark, heavy, bluesy, somewhat murky album, and this song and the title track are those two songs. So this ranks up pretty high for me. I'm putting it at number 3. Warning.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't, when I was younger, I had no idea this was a cover till years later. I had this on cassette and there was no information on the inside of the cassette. So, I had no idea. And you're right, it does fit right in. So, okay, number 3 for me is Behind the Wall Sleep. I love the feel of this one. I always thought it was super cool the way Ozzy's voice, there's like two,
Yeah.
he's singing two voices and they're like slightly out of sync with each other. Yeah,
Panning left and right.
right. And they have this little bit of a delay between the two of them, so it creates this like effect. I remember I would turn on just the right side or left side of my stereo just so I could hear just that one voice, and it always sounded so strange because that's such a signature, part of the song. But I love just the feel of it. I love at the end when Bill is just playing like that kind of funky beat.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. And the intro to it and everything, the way it drops down, it's they're moving along, boo da do da do da da do go, and then it just
So cool.
It's just great. So number 3 for me, Behind the Walls. I also like the lyrics too, sort of the trippy psychedelic lyrics, vision cupped within a flower. It's just a fantastic imagery. So number 3 for me, Behind the Wall Sleep.
Okay, number 2 for me is I'm putting NIB at number 2. I think it's probably the most cohesive song on the album. It works well within the context of the album, but is probably the one song that is easily a standalone song. There's a lot of spontaneous guitar soloing on this album. On this, and we've talked about this when we were talking about our favorite Iommi leads. This one is really well structured. It's very well thought out. It's really melodic. It's a part of the song that if that solo wasn't in there, if there was like an alternative take, maybe there is, that has a different solo, I would not like it as much. Not only because I've been so used to hearing it this way, but because the solo is really very effective and it serves the song really well. And that's something that was kind of unusual for Tony's playing at this time, but he really nails it on NIB. The lyrics are cool. The story about, Lucifer having a romance or approaching, this mortal, I guess, is kind of interesting. That's where you get the first glimpse into that supernatural occult type thing that the Black Sabbath becomes a part of the Black Sabbath tapestry, if you will. Otherwise, it has a familiarity with Cream's Sunshine of Your Love a little bit. The first time I heard the song, I thought, and I was a kid, and of course, you can't not be alive and listen to classic rock radio and not hear Sunshine of Your Love. I mean, and it's a great song, so justifiably so. But when I first heard it, I thought, wow, this sounds a lot like Cream's Sunshine of Your Love. Then it's more coming from the riff. The riff isn't exactly similar, but I think in its the structure of the riff, the sound of the riff, it's sort of similar to Cream's Sunshine of Your Love. So in that regard, NIB kind of brings in a classic rock feel to it. It's less of an obscure blues rock song cycle from movement to movement. This is one that kind of stands on its own, and I think it's a pretty prominent song, and likewise it's in a prominent place on my ranking. It's number 2. So.
Nice. Number 2 for me is Wicked World. This for me sort of captures all the magic of early Black Sabbath chemistry that they had. Bill Ward's jump swing hi-hat thing at the beginning, it's just classic, them incorporating their jazz influence when the whole thing breaks down and it goes into the main riff, especially when it does the world today is a dun, 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 and Iommi's just chugging on his low string there. That's just so heavy. I love the lyrics. They're so sort of like, nihilistic and pessimistic and everything, Geezer Butler, uh, classic Geezer Butler lyric. But I just love the main riff. I love the transitions in it. And even though there's some jamming and guitar like breakdown where everybody stops and Iommi's just kind of doing his own thing, it works much better for me in here than it does in Warning, because Warning kind of has the same thing where Iommi is sort of jamming around and everything. But for me, it kind of adds to the atmosphere of the song, the way he breaks that down and he's doing like those finger picked things and everything. Just where he moves through all the different stuff, I just think is really cool. So, but for me, the lyrics, those verses and everything, it's just so heavy, and that low chugging riff, it's just so doomy and heavy, and it just matches the lyrics and the mood of the song for me. So Wicked World comes in at number 2.
Yeah.
All right, that only leaves us with our number 1, which I think by process of elimination,
Yeah.
we both had the same number 1.
Yeah, I mean, it's like the big bang of heavy metal. I mean, I think this is the starting point. I think this is where heavy metal was. I mean, this is the beginning of heavy metal. I mean, Black Sabbath. It's such a heavy song. There was nothing like it at the time. Dark, scary. I think we've talked about, the first time we heard it, we were kind of scared when we first heard it. It's one of those things where you got to have all the lights on when you're listening to it, and you're like, I don't know, 8 years old, 9 years old or something. But you embrace that sort of thing, and I always have. Gosh, I mean, it's just like it's such a unique song, and on this album, you're talking about the atmosphere that it builds with the beginning, with the rain and the church bell, and you listen to that, and you turn it up, you turn the lights out, you close your eyes. I mean, it puts you right in that scene. I mean, you could just you're there. It puts you right in the center of the song. Ozzy's voice, as it would turn out later, is a little bit different. I mean, the first time I heard it, this wasn't the first Black Sabbath album I heard, so when I did come around to this, I was kind of taken back by the way Ozzy's voice sounded. I thought he sounded like he was drunk or something.
Yeah.
His voice is like deeper and not as much on the high range, but yeah, it's an incredible song. It's definitely the Black Sabbath calling card. Self-titled, namesake, whatever you want to call it, Black Sabbath. It's just a masterpiece. Top number 1.
Yep, number 1 for me also. It's just such an iconic song. Again, like you said, if you had to draw a lineage back to, what was the spark, what was the big bang, like you said, it would have to be this song for me. And people will argue that there's heavier stuff from Jimi Hendrix or Cream and stuff like that. And yeah, they were loud and everything like that, but they didn't have this mood. To me, it's about the atmosphere and the mood, the impending dread, the fear, the horror,
Yeah, exactly.
It just, to me, that is what makes this different. And it's so simple, the verse and the verse is the riff quiet, and then if you want to call it the chorus, is just the riff loud. But it's so primitive that it's almost like has this sort of scary, like almost like tribal feel, scary out in the nature. It's just so primitive and it's so simple. The way this album is mixed too, there's a lot of air and room reverb to it, and Bill Ward's drums just kind of doing this like tribal, thing on his toms. It's very simple, and it always made me think of, again, like this sort of like you're out in the jungle, in the dark jungle, and you're hearing this sound in the distance. It's very scary. It's very primitive. Ozzy's vocals, like you said, it wasn't my first Black Sabbath album either. So when I first heard it, I remember being sort of taken aback by his voice, because it sounds lower and a little darker, a little more bass sound to his deeper sound to his voice, but it fits the mood of this song just perfectly, and that, oh no, please God, the way his voice gets pulled back in the mix. And, then the rain and the bell, like you mentioned at the beginning, it's just wow. And then at the end of the song, when it goes into sort of that gallop I mean, that's such a, a metal trope at this point to have that in your so slow beginning and then a galloping ending. But I mean, at that time, they created this, and again, you're just picturing hammer horror, the guy in the English countryside on his horse,
Yeah,
just the whole
absolutely.
thing, castles, and
Yeah,
it
yeah,
just captures all that. And I would just look at that album cover, and this song just fit that cover, rain and the church bell and everything. And to this day, I say this all the time, you throw a bell into a song for me, and it immediately makes it epic, and immediately makes I like it. I have, and it goes back to the sound of that bell and the rain and everything, and just the atmosphere of the whole thing. It's for me why this is the beginning of heavy metal. Hendrix, Cream, the Who, yeah, they were loud and they made a lot of noise, and they did have some quasi heavy riffs, but nobody was doing this. Nobody had this mood, this vibe going on. So yeah, it's just such an iconic song in their catalog. It's Ozzy did it in his solo band for years. Sabbath does it. I mean, it's like a signature song for them. It's like the beginning. When you hear this, it's like, okay, this is where it formed. They're opening up this old tablet or these old books or something. Here it is. Here is the birth of heavy metal. So for both of us here, it's our number one. So
yeah. And one last thing, or maybe a couple last things about Black Sabbath. It's the notes. It's the notes, or the space between the notes,
yeah,
that's just as effective as the actual notes that are being played. When you're talking about Bill Ward's drumming, I can't think of anything that anyone else is doing. Now, I haven't listened to everything that was coming out at the time, but I've listened to quite a bit of contemporary rock, what was then contemporary rock music and blues rock and stuff like that, many years later, over the course of time. And I still can't really pinpoint anything that is um, similar to what Bill is doing. And you could tell it's just an expression, like they just got into the mode of what this song, what the atmosphere that was building up, the riff, what is it called? Tritone? Is that
yeah,
what that's called? Yeah. Which was unique. It was a unique
yeah,
thing at the time. And that's one of the things that I think. Now you have like a song like Dazed and Confused, where it has the slow,
yeah,
brooding tempo, very bluesy. And in some ways it is kind of similar to Black Sabbath. Uh, insofar as the things that I just described, the tempo, the hi-hat that Bonzo's going on off of, and just the way that it builds into like a pretty thick atmosphere. But the thing, and you mentioned Hendrix, there's some people could say that, oh well, there was some really heavy Hendrix, and they wouldn't be wrong, but the Hendrix lyrics weren't talking about a demonic figure with a finger pointing out. You know,
yeah,
the lyrics were different. Led Zeppelin wasn't singing about this type of subject matter. Jimi
yeah,
Hendrix wasn't singing about this type of subject matter. So
yeah.
even though you had heavy expressions in both those bands, it wasn't a complete package that Black Sabbath brought to the table. It's like, okay, we have heavy music. Now we're going to give you some heavy lyrics
Yeah.
to correspond with that. It's not going to be about it's not going to be a love song, or it's not going to be a blues song. This is going to be a horror themed lyric accompanying this heavy music. And that's what made Black Sabbath so unique. And that's what I think is what birthed heavy metal, is all those elements combined. Whereas if there was no Black Sabbath, and I guess who knows how things would have shaped, what course would have been taken. If there were to be a heavy metal without Black Sabbath, certainly it would have probably been Led Zeppelin or Jimi Hendrix, at least as far as the impetus is concerned.
Yeah.
But Black Sabbath, just for what they do and what they were doing, and then being the first to do it, they just squashed anything else that would have been the competition at the time. So
Yeah.
that's what makes Black Sabbath, the song, so valuable. Not just in the Black Sabbath discography, it just in general. I mean, if you're a metalhead, you have to bow to the altar of the song Black Sabbath. I mean, if you're a metalhead, you don't like Black Sabbath, That's unusual. Most people do, but most people do pay reverence to the song Black Sabbath. So that's our number one.
Well said, well said. All right, there's our list. Let us know down below what you guys think of our list. Let us know what your list would be. How would you rank the songs on the first Black Sabbath album? Let us know in the comments down below. Make sure you check out our podcast, and we'll see you at the next Sabbath Sunday.